You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. I want to start by warning our stations who carry this program on radio and syndication that we may be running a little long this week. For those of you who listen on podcast, no need to worry. Well, it's been another ho-hum week. Comey's testimony, White House chaos, constitutional crisis, and the Cosby trial. Well, my guests include a former prosecutor and an expert on drug-facilitated rape who's going to, in fact, take us inside the act that precipitated the Cosby trial. My other guest is a physicist who wrote a brilliant piece called The Physics of Melanin. But before we get to any of that, we need to put on our oxygen masks, or maybe it's snorkel masks, and go inside the headlines. Okay, people, let's try to breathe. Perspective. We need perspective. So, damn it, I'm going to start with this. Bones found in a Moroccan cave add 100,000 years to the history of human fossils. The bones are from early anatomically modern humans. The oldest Homo sapiens bones known until now date to about 200,000 years ago, but the new bones and the new analysis shows these fossils are 300 to 350,000 years old. So, looking at the headlines today, it's clear that we've been evolving, but very slowly. The Bill Cosby trial began with Andrea Constand showing enormous fortitude and guts by testifying for 9 grueling hours over 2 days about Cosby's alleged sexual assaults against her. We'll be going into more detail about this with my first guest later on in the program. All right, no way to put it off any longer. Trump time. Former FBI Director James Comey's testimony before the Senate and the Trumpian meltdown before, during, and afterward warrant their own attention in fighting words at the end of the program. This is imperative since space here inside the headlines is crowded with other major news. During this past week alone, we learned that Trump thought it would be a great idea to use the London ISIL attack as an occasion to launch Twitter assaults on the London mayor, the U.S. courts, and his own Justice Department, and that in doing so he gave opponents of his Muslim immigration ban even more ammunition for when the case does reach the Supreme Court. We learned that the White House is telling federal agencies to ignore Democratic lawmakers' oversight requests, fearing the information could be used against Trump. Republican sources, principled Republican sources, inside and outside the administration, said that Uttam Dillon, a White House lawyer, told agencies not to cooperate with such requests from Democrats. Congressional oversight letters requesting information from agencies have gone unanswered since January. Also, the Trump White House, the pro-Trump Great America Alliance, the Republican National Committee, and other Trump groups tried to undermine Comey's credibility in the days leading up to his testimony with a barrage of digital ads and 30-second TV ads smearing his reliability. And we learned that Trump asked his own newly appointed Director of National Intelligence, Dan Coats, to urge Comey to relent in investigating Michael Flynn. After this was reported by the Washington Post, Coats sidestepped confirming it during public testimony at the Senate committee. And we learned that the much-vaunted White House War Room, announced by Steve Bannon recently to combat the so-called incoming fire from investigative journalists, well, that War Room is now on hold. It seems there's no one to staff it. Furthermore, it was to be run by Jared Kushner, who himself is now under investigation. Additionally, another brainchild of Bannon and Kushner's, the so-called Strategic Initiatives Group, which was founded as an alternative to the National Security Council, is no longer in operation. It seems to have had a brief life, doomed by infighting between its founders and by a lack of funding. Pause. Breathe. Think. It occurs to me that the Republic is being saved in no small part by the sheer ineptitude of this regime. Mussolini at least reportedly made the trains run on time. If these people were more competent, we'd be facing the Third Reich at its peak of efficiency and might all be dead by now. Big breath. Back in. The diplomatic crisis in the Gulf involving Saudi Arabia and its neighbors against Qatar may have been partially driven by Russian hackers, according to CNN, but that didn't stop Trump from trying to take credit for the dispute. The Saudis and their allies want, among other things, to punish Qatar for hosting the one free voice of journalism in the region, Al Jazeera, and for daring to keep ties open with Iran, which, it must be admitted, at least holds elections. Trump now claims that Qatar is funding and fomenting terrorism, which of course it is, but which everyone in the region does, and which his pals the Saudis do more and better than anybody else anywhere. Trump also overlooked, or perhaps never knew, the fact that Qatar hosts the forwarding headquarters of the U.S. Central Command, which is crucial to the fight against Daesh ISIL, and is a major intelligence hub in the region and the largest U.S. military base in the Middle East, and which houses 11,000 U.S. military personnel, just left dangling out there by Trump, who, after all, really wants to stay popular with the Saudis. Listen, the Saudis spent $270,000 at the Trump Hotel for food and lodging their lobbyists over the past month alone in an influence campaign to water down legislation that could put Saudi Arabia on the hook financially for the 9/11 attacks. According to Lawfare and the Financial Times, also left dangling, but much less reported, is whatever happened to that $110 billion arms deal with Saudi Arabia, which was so loudly celebrated during Trump's visit. Well, it turns out there is no $110 billion deal. Instead, there's a bunch of letters of interest or intent, but no contracts. Many are offers that the defense industry thinks the Saudis will be interested in someday. But nothing's been notified to the Senate for review, and the Defense Security Cooperation Agency, which is the arms sale wing of the Pentagon, calls them intended sales. Oh, by the way, none of these deals identified so far are new. All of them began in the Obama administration. Lies within lies within lies. Last week, we reported that China Labor Watch, a nonprofit organization that aims to defend workers' rights, had been investigating the Chinese factories in which women produce Ivanka Trump's shoes, working as long as 12.5-hour days, 6 days a week, at the equivalence of $1 an hour. This week, we learned that the activists in China who were doing the investigations in her factories have vanished. The Washington Post reported that they were arrested and their families are unable to get answers from the government. There's been no comment from Ivanka Trump. Despite the Trumps and all their orcs, however, individuals and citizens of our republic are holding fast. David Rank, a 27-year career diplomat and acting U.S. ambassador to China, resigned, saying he was unable to back Trump on having left the Paris Climate Accords. Nearly 6 in 10 Americans oppose that withdrawal, according to a new Washington Post ABC News poll, and a 56% majority say Trump is interfering with congressional, Senate, and independent counsel investigations rather than cooperating, while 61% say Trump fired Comey to protect himself rather than for the good of the country. The current conventional wisdom has it that Trump's base, perhaps 34-35% of the country, won't abandon him no matter what. But according to statistician Nate Silver, that theory is not supported by evidence that Trump's base does seem to be eroding. There's been a considerable decline in the number of Americans who strongly approve of Trump, from a peak of around 30% in February to just 21% now. And voters who strongly disapprove of Trump now outnumber those who strongly approve of him by a 2-to-1 ratio, an enthusiasm gap that's expected to show itself at the midterm elections. I'll close this segment with media news both in the headlines and inside them. Reality winner. Could we pause for a moment and just reassure each other that none of us is delusional? I mean, depending on one's viewpoint, a leaker or a whistleblower has emerged named reality winner. Alice, we are way beyond Wonderland and the Looking Glass and deep into the funhouse. I'm putting the story of the arrest of reality winner in this media section because so far it's a media story, and we don't know that much yet about this 26-year-old young woman, an intelligence contractor accused of leaking an NSA classified report that Russian meddling in the election might have reached as far as voter registration data. We do know that Reality once referred to Trump on social media as an orange fascist, which in my book is a mark in her favor, but we don't know yet whether she's a martyred, patriotic hero or not. What we do know is that because of what appears to be carelessness on the part of the news source to which she sent the information, the website The Intercept, this case has raised concerns about measures taken by news organizations to protect confidential informers. She should have sent it to the Washington Post or the New York Times. Some reporters are worrying about a chilling effect on potential sources. Wonder Woman is the first blockbuster superhero film to be directed by a woman, and 52% of the film's audience on opening weekend were female, significant for a genre previously dominated by men. It netted $100.5 million that weekend, becoming the top-grossing movie in the U.S., and shattered the celluloid ceiling idea that women can't direct a big-budget movie. Not only that, but the reviews were good, too. P.S. Sofia Coppola became the second woman to win Best Director at the Cannes Film Festival since it began in 1939. Dashing abroad for a moment, for a cautionary tale for us at home, India's press freedom suffered a blow when the government raided homes and offices connected to the founders of NDTV, India's oldest television news station. Since Prime Minister Modi took office in 2014, journalists have faced increasing pressures. The temptation to self-censor has grown. In such a news-rich climate, and with readers so involved here, it came as a shock when, Wednesday before last, New York Times publisher Arthur Sulzberger, Jr. wrote a memo to staffers announcing he was summarily ending the job and the concept of the public editor. He wrote, "The responsibility of the public editor to serve as the reader's representative has outgrown that one office. Our business requires that we must all seek to hold ourselves accountable to our readers." Sounds nice, but frankly, this is uncomfortably reminiscent of college administrations claiming that subsuming women's studies under gender or black studies under ethnic, or even eliminating both of them outright, because all courses taught in all disciplines should have the consciousness of both oppressions and struggles informing them. Or, like stations, ending women-focused programming because that should be integrated with the whole. Well, yeah, should. But then that actually never happens. And meanwhile, we lose the foothold we did have, all without having been consulted. When the group that has power makes decisions on behalf of groups that don't, be wary. This is a sad development at the New York Times, and one we will watch very carefully. It's time for a break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, but I'll be back in just a moment, and then I'll be speaking with a woman who has the smarts, the expertise, and the stubborn dedication to tell us just what the Bill Cosby trial for alleged drug-facilitated sexual assault means and why it's so very important. Coming right up.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back. Jane Manning has graced this program with her presence before. She is a former prosecutor. When she was a prosecutor, she specialized in cases of domestic violence, child abuse, and sex crimes. And in private practice, she provided pro bono free representation to a coalition of battered women's organizations. She now serves as Director of Advocacy of the New York City chapter of the National Organization for Women, focusing on their new initiative to combat drug-facilitated sexual assault. And we're going to talk, as you might have imagined, about the trial of Bill Cosby. Jane, welcome back to the program. It's always good and comforting to have you here.
Thank you so much, Robin.
You are my go-to person on so many things. As a former prosecutor, on sexual assault and the varying forms of it. You helped write New York's first anti-trafficking statute. I mean, you've been so active in the prostitution, trafficking, sexual assault area, and you know so much. We need you to help us put the Bill Cosby trial in the context of drug-facilitated sexual assault.
Yes, absolutely. And one of the few good things to come out of this really appalling story of Bill Cosby is the fact that it's giving us, as a society, the chance to learn more about drug-facilitated sexual assault. It's a horrifying crime. It's more prevalent than most of us realize. It's more prevalent than I realized even when I was a prosecutor. And we know this from the number of especially young women who are coming to our organization to tell us about their experiences with this crime, and also the small amount of data that we have on this topic indicates that it's more prevalent than most people realize, and it's under-recognized and it's under-prosecuted.
Oh, God. I had somebody, a man who you'd think would know better, an educated man, a few months ago, literally say to me, well, it can't be as bad as other kinds of rape because the woman's out of it.
It's horrifying. It's a horrifying thing to say, but it's not unusual to hear people say that, including to the victims themselves. It's not unusual for the victim to be told,
God.
"Well, you're luckier than other victims of rape because you don't remember it." And the truth is, I mean, you can't compare anyone's rape as being better or worse than anyone else's rape, but drug-facilitated rape is a uniquely traumatic crime to suffer because your very memory is robbed from you.
Yes.
And so perpetrators and all too often police and prosecutors will say, no, you weren't raped. You must have just gotten drunk, and you don't remember that you consented to sex with him. And the victim doesn't even have her own memory to fight back with, even though she knows she didn't consent to sex with this guy or multiple guys, as the case may be. So it's a horrifying crime.
Well, you're gaslighted on top of being raped.
Yeah.
And then also, as we all know, it's there somewhere deep in the subconscious, so you get flashbacks without knowing what they are. I mean, it's hideous. And this guy actually said it. Oh, God. All right.
It's hideous. And one of the other real difficulties with this crime is that the drugs that are used by most drug predators are very difficult to detect, either because they dissipate quickly from the bloodstream or because some of them are newly synthesized drugs that are being cooked up by illegal, amateur chemists. And they don't even fit the molecular profile of a recognized drug, and so there is no test for them. The medical examiner right here in New York City said to me the labs can't keep up with new drugs that are coming onto the market. And so what happens is that victims go to the police. They do everything right. Go to the police, go to the hospital, get a kit done, give blood and urine, and that blood and urine is tested, and the test comes back negative. And the victim is told, "See, you weren't drugged. We told you all along you weren't drugged." Those more often than not, those negative test results cannot be trusted because either the drug has dissipated or it's an unfamiliar drug that has been used. So it's countless victims are being denied justice and told that what they know to be true isn't true, and it's heartbreaking. There is some good news about this.
Honey, give it to me. I really need it. I need it. Go on.
So the good news is that as in most efforts to pursue justice, right, something can be done about this. And here's what can be done. When prosecutors are really smart and really knowledgeable and really determined to bring justice, they are consulting expert witnesses called drug recognition experts. And that can be a toxicologist, or it can even be like a retired narcotics cop or a well-trained narcotics cop who knows how to recognize the symptoms of a particular class of drugs. And can testify about that on the witness stand. And so there have been cases where the victim's blood and urine came back negative, and so the prosecution consulted a drug recognition expert who will do a detailed timeline of the victim's symptoms, when they began, what they ended, what the symptoms were, how the victims felt even after regaining consciousness, what the victim had to eat and drink before the symptoms came on, and the timing of those things. And in many cases, a drug recognition can say, no, these symptoms are inconsistent with what she had to eat and drink. They cannot be explained simply as alcohol intoxication. Something else was administered to this person. And there was a wonderful conviction out in Nassau County, right here in New York, last year against a really horrible rapist named Dennis Edison, who was attracting young women to stay with him using a couch surfing app, and he drugged and raped a young woman who was staying with him. And luckily, the police in Long Beach were dogged in their investigation and consulted a drug recognition expert. And when they came to arrest this guy, he was already renting out his apartment to another young woman who would very likely have been his next victim. They were able to identify the drug that he used, even though the victim's blood test was negative. They identified the drug by its symptoms. It was GHB, which is one of the most common predatory drugs, but also one of the hardest to detect. The drug recognition expert testified at trial, as did the courageous victim, and the guy was was convicted, and he is now serving a 10-year prison sentence. So this can be done. We are not helpless against this crime, but we need to become educated about it. We need to demand that our police and prosecutors become educated about it, and we need the political will to sink resources into prosecuting this horrific and under-prosecuted crime. And getting the word out is something that we have the opportunity to do now with the Bill Cosby trial in progress, and that's why I'm grateful to you for having this conversation today. But I am also so profoundly grateful to Andrea Constand for having the courage to testify against this wealthy, powerful, famous man and to put herself in the spotlight in front of the whole country. She is not only giving 57 women their only shot at a remedy from the criminal justice system, but she's also giving the rest of us an education for the whole country in what sexual assault really looks like. And this is so important, Robin, and it's so needed, because one of the reasons why victims of sexual assault so often don't get justice is that many of us walk around with kind of a script in our heads of what a real rape looks like. It's a stranger, there's a weapon, and the victim is innocent, and she reports it to the hospital right away and to the police right away. And the truth is that the reality of sexual assault doesn't usually fit that script. Most sexual assaults are perpetrated against someone that the predator knows. Predators make that choice deliberately because they believe it's their best choice to get away with rape by claiming consent, so they target someone they know. And for the victim afterwards, it's such a jarring experience to be the victim of this kind of violence by someone that you knew and trusted, that very often the victims don't react the way we expect them to. So they may take a long time to go to the police because it takes a long time to process this person who I trusted and believed in is a rapist. It's a very hard thing to come to grips with. And also then the questions of will I be believed? Will I be blamed? Will they do anything to help me?
Women are no fools. Women internalize the message, which is loud and clear, which is that you must have done something to provoke it. You know, you must have worn something, or why did you have a drink, or why were you walking alone on the street at high noon, 11 o'clock in the morning in a snowsuit? You know, that's seductive. I mean, whatever it is, whatever it it
That's
is,
right.
it's your fault.
It's always your fault somehow.
Yeah.
That's right. And so the norm is for victims of sex crimes, especially by an acquaintance, to need some time to process what they're going to do before they go to the police. That's the norm, not the exception.
Yeah.
And yet, we've seen Ms. Constand's credibility attacked for not going immediately to the police.
I do think things are changing, not fast enough for my liking, but they are changing in that, just this past year or so, we've had, there's the Trump climate, of course, and the grabbing and all of that. But in addition, there's been the Fox News climate and Ailes, and then the difference, of course, with Cosby is that he was not only rich and famous and powerful, but he was loved. So for a survivor to come up and tell a story against somebody who has been beloved, is in its own way even more courageous than what the women at Fox News did, which was to come up against somebody who was generally hated, but also universally feared. That's
so true. And you see that even in Andrea Constand's own, she herself was conflicted. I mean, you see her efforts to go back to normal life after this assault, and the fact that, as the defense attorneys have made much of, she herself called Bill Cosby and tried to talk to him after the assault. Sometimes talk to him about the assault, sometimes talk to him about other things. And again, it's classic and it's common in acquaintance rape cases to see the victim try to go back to quote unquote normal life. And if this person was someone beloved, to try to reestablish things the way they used to be, rather than in this new horrible post-rape reality.
The New York City chapter of National Organization for Women, of which you are the director of advocacy, has a new initiative to combat drug-facilitated sexual assault, right?
That's exactly right. Our wonderful president, Sonia Osorio. She was the one, by the way, who was leading the protests outside Fox News headquarters here in New York City in the days leading up to Bill O'Reilly being finally held accountable. But she became aware of this problem of young women coming to our chapter asking for help getting their cases looked at, specifically in cases of drug rape, because police and prosecutors in more than one case that came to us were saying, no, you must have just gotten drunk, when there was a lot of evidence that no, that's not what happened. And so she decided to create this initiative against drug-facilitated sexual assault, and now we are providing services we have a charitable partner organization, Women's Justice Now, and through Women's Justice Now, we are providing services to survivors of drug-facilitated sexual assault, actually across the country. We are helping women from New York to San Francisco and from New Orleans to Seattle.
Wow, this is fantastic, Jane. What is the website where people can contact or find out more about this?
So the website is nownyc.org. That's NOWNYC.org.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much for your expertise and your brain and your skill and your heart, because you've been at this for so long and so brilliantly. And I'm so personally grateful, and also just grateful that you helped us put what we're seeing with the Cosby trial in a context, so that it can actually be turned into helping other women who face this kind of situation. Thank you so much, and thanks for being with us today.
Robin, thank you.
And now it's time for the Surrealism Corner. The Surrealism Corner this week will be shorter than usual because so much of its content went into the headlines section at the top of the show. Reality winner. I'm just going to keep saying that name. Trump versus reality winner. EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt claimed on at least 3 occasions that the United States had created 50,000 coal and mining jobs under Trump. The figure is, in fact, 1,000 jobs, which is a bit short of 50,000 and even short of the 1,400 such jobs created in the last 4 months of the Obama administration. That's according to the Washington Post. According to a Forbes report, the Trump Organization may have gained $1.2 million intended for the St. Jude Children's Research Hospital through the annual Eric Trump Foundation Golf Invitational. That must make Marlo Thomas really pissed off. 15 law professors from around the country have filed a professional misconduct complaint against White House counselor Kellyanne Conway, who was a graduate of George Washington University Law School and was admitted to the D.C. bar in 1995. The woman's a lawyer. You would never know it. The disciplinary filing asks that Conway be sanctioned for violating government ethics rules and for conduct involving dishonesty, fraud, deceit, or misrepresentation, and it cites numerous statements as examples. Conway, listed as a D.C. bar member under her pre-marriage name, Fitzpatrick, is already a suspended member for not paying her dues. Walter M. Schaub, Jr. is a plump, balding, mild-mannered, middle-aged white man, a bureaucrat who lacks subpoena power but not courage. But Walter should henceforth be known as Ethics Man. Howard is head of the Office of Government Ethics, which was created in the aftermath of Watergate, and he stood up to the Trump regime and nagged, repeatedly demanding a list of the former private sector lobbyists or industry lawyers hired by the Trump regime and to whom the White House had given waivers in their new government appointments. No administration ever before refused to comply about such waivers, but of course the Trump regime did refuse. New government hires who were former lobbyists are prohibited from working on the same issue for 2 years unless they're granted administration waivers, which in turn enables the Office of Government Ethics to track their behavior once they are part of the administration. Well, finally, the White House blinked, reversed its position, and disclosed 24 ethics waivers. Ethics Man triumphed. Here's a fun fact to spoil New Orleans for you forever. Louisiana has the highest incarceration rate in America. The state's prison population is bigger than that of China, Russia, and North Korea combined, according to the Bureau of Justice Statistics and the Prison Policy Initiative think tank. The majority of the prisoners are African American. As statues of Confederate heroes, some would call them traitors, fall across the South, a noose was left inside the National Museum of African American History and Culture. And finally, to round out the surrealism corner, director Oliver Stone, himself given to conspiracy theories, did a long interview with Vladimir Putin, which will air on Showtime sometime this month. Putin, while giving Stone a tour of the Kremlin's gilded throne room, suited to Donald Trump tastes, Putin comments, quote, "I am such a hard worker. I am always working. I am not a woman, so I don't have bad days." Close quote. Then he adds, "I am not trying to insult anyone. That's just the nature of things. There are certain natural cycles." Close quote. Tell it to Catherine the Great, Vlad. In closing, reality winner. We have to take another pause. This is Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and when we return in just a moment, we'll be speaking with a woman who is the living personification of that great line entitled by Lorraine Hansberry, wonderful writer, to be young, gifted, and black, and in this case, also a feminist physicist. Wow.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back again. Dr. Chanda Prescod-Weinstein has one of the most unusual and beautiful biographies I've ever read of a guest. She's an early universe cosmologist. And a cosmologist, that means she thinks about the universe and everything in it and how all that came to take the form that it has. But she's also an activist. She's a committee chair and past ex officio board member and past conference co-chair of the National Society of Black Physicists. She's an active member of the National Society of Hispanic Physicists and the Society for the Advancement of Chicanos and Hispanics and Native Americans in the Sciences. She's a proudly out founding and continuing member of the American Astronomical Society Committee for Sexual Orientation and Gender Minorities in Astronomy, and she supports peace and justice through her membership on the Jewish Voice for Peace Academic Advisory Council. She says in her bio, I proudly hail from the East Los Angeles neighborhood of El Sereno, the 63rd Black American woman to earn a PhD in physics. I'm a descendant of Afro-Caribbean and Ashkenazi Jewish immigrants, and she has written a piece called The Physics of Melanin, which I found fascinating, and I convinced her to come and tell us about it. Dr. Chanda Prescod-Weinstein. Chanda, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So I've been reading your biography, and it says, I proudly hail from the East Los Angeles neighborhood of El Sereno, the 63rd Black American woman to earn a PhD in physics. I am a descendant of Afro-Caribbean and Ashkenazi Jewish immigrants. You also say, I am a proudly out founding and continuing member of the American Astronomical Society Committee for Sexual Orientation and Gender Minorities in Astronomy. So you are a woman with Afro-Caribbean and Ashkenazic Jewish roots who is also gay and is a cosmologist and a physicist. Well, that must have been an easy climb for you.
I guess I should say that probably it would be more, so I usually say I'm queer. I am married to a man now. And in a lot of ways, so I would say that things have been challenging, but I definitely have had advantages along the way. I had two parents who went to college. Which I think was actually unusual for kids in the neighborhood where I grew up.
Yeah.
And I'm Black, but I'm light-skinned, and so I don't always face some of the issues that other Black women in physics end up facing, or sometimes they're not as harsh for me. On the other hand, I end up having weird conversations sometimes, particularly with older Jewish professors who, instead of asking me about my science, start asking me like which one of my parents is Jewish, and it typically, I had one who gave me a Hebrew reading test in his office instead of talking science with me. So there could be like a lot of weird stuff that kind of goes on because of that.
Even though you're focusing on the privileges you have, which is both honorable and generous-hearted of you, it's kind of amazing that you're upright, and you must be one hell of a smart physicist. You wrote this stunning article called The Physics of Melanin, which I came across in an issue of Bitch magazine, which is getting better all the time, that magazine. And it is, well, let me bring a little personal backstory to this. I began to be a fan of Melanin, after seeing what was a PBS video that later became a book called The Journey of Man by Spencer Wells, a genealogist. And it traced the birth, of course, of human beings in Africa and up through Europe, and noted that the whole reason white folks came into being at all was that when the people moved north, the first great exodus, they could not absorb vitamin D as well as when they had been in Africa, because melanin protected the Africans from the heat of the equatorial sun. And I thought at that point, he then traces this throughout the world, tracing the Y chromosome, and it is an extraordinary book. I thought, if this film could be shown to every third grade or fourth grade class in this country to make them understand that racism, their idea of race was really a matter of vitamin D, you might in a generation or two make a dent into racism in this country. You have now come along with a scientific analysis of the physics of melanin and connected that with the politics that is stunning. I know there's no time for you to go into it in full, but can you give us a taste of what you wrote in this article?
I should start by saying that I give full credit to my editor for the piece, Britt Ashley, for actually choosing that topic. I had sent her a few different things that I could write about, and she picked that one, and I was actually kind of unhappy about it because I wasn't sure that I was excited to write the piece, but the response that it has gotten has been great. So the general, I had a couple of motivations for thinking about it. So one thing was that I was one of the many African Americans who over the last 10 years has been diagnosed with vitamin D deficiency. And so I got curious about when I asked my doctor, well, how did this happen? He was like, well, you're more likely to have this problem if you're of African descent, if you have darker skin. And so I was kind of curious about that, and I started looking into it and learning that actually the test that is typically used for vitamin D deficiency maybe doesn't even actually work for African Americans properly, or for people of African descent in general.
Right, because pale male bodies are the definitive. They are the generic. They are considered the generic.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's exactly it, is that, and I think that that's really kind of what the article speaks to, even though I don't think that I say this explicitly, that we study, in science, we end up studying basically what typically and traditionally white men have thought were interesting questions.
Yes.
And so for a long time, the only interest that white men broadly seem to have in melanin was for categorizing people, sorting people, putting them in, the holds of ships and shipping them across the ocean and that kind of thing.
Right.
And then as time went on, as scientific racism became more popular, people were sort of interested in creating these hierarchies of, Black people are inferior, and you can see it because of the shapes of their heads and the color of their skin and that kind of thing.
Right.
And then more recently, people have started to get interested in melanin because skin cancer is on the rise. And there was a realization that we need to figure out how to do preventative work to prevent people from getting skin cancer. And that, for example, in places like Australia, where there's a lot of sun and a lot of white people, that people were at particular risk for skin cancer, and that maybe melanin offered some solutions because of this role it plays. And so suddenly, melanin is now considered an interesting topic and is also possibly advantageous after, scientists have spent centuries demonizing skin color.
Yeah. No, suddenly it's valuable to white folks.
Yes, exactly. And so I thought it was kind of an interesting intersection of science with also the anthropology of science. How do we decide what questions are worth investigating and what parts of the world are worth understanding? And then also kind of this other question, which is that I have trained as a physicist and spent my entire life never asking the question, what is the relationship between light and my skin and my mother's skin and my uncle's skin? And it was kind of astonishing, actually, to sit back and realize that I had never asked that question, even though, my job is to be curious.
I hope a book comes out of this, Chandra. I really do. And I'd love to read you on other subjects. What were the other subjects you were going to write on? My God, that you get.
That's a good question. So I've actually been working on an essay about trying to use a physical phenomenon called weak gravitational lensing to explain racism to scientists who don't experience racism.
Wow.
This is kind of an analogy that I started tweeting about it, I think, sometime last year, and some people were like, "Oh, that just really makes it click for me. I'd never really thought about it." And kind of the clinching point is that so weak gravitational lensing is basically Einstein's theory of relativity, which is our dominant theory of gravitation, tells us that space-time can be curved. Because space-time can be curved, when you get really massive objects, it can do pretty wild things to space-time and actually turn space-time into a funhouse mirror for light. So light can follow weird trajectories where you will actually get multiple images of one object. So it really is just like a funhouse mirror that you might see at a carnival.
So it's also, is that like when you, let's say it's a rainy night on the street in a city, and you squint your eyes at a street lamp, and you see the way that light kind of bends? Is that related to what you're saying?
Yeah. So I guess you could think of that as kind of analogous, but you're definitely thinking about light bending. Except the difference is that you don't have any water or anything that's causing the light to bend. It's just the shape of, it's the straightest line that the light can follow in space. And so when you get the big multiple images, this is called strong gravitational lensing. But there's also a phenomenon called weak gravitational lensing, where images of galaxies just get distorted a little bit. So they can either they can be more elliptical. So instead of being more circular, they look stretched out. And there's also something, we don't have a good word for it. It can bananify. So it can actually start to be shaped like a banana. This is the image that we get. But in order to actually say that you have observed weak gravitational lensing, you have to see the impact on several galaxies at once. So it's a statistical phenomenon. That's how we do weak gravitational lensing detection. And somewhat similarly, so you can point to any one galaxy and say maybe that galaxy just has that shape. But if you start to look at all of the galaxies in the same region, you say, oh, they all seem to be stretched out. So there's probably an effect there that's not specific to that galaxy.
So it's context, in other words.
It's context. And to me, kind of the analogy there is that you experience a sexist incident as a woman, or as a Black woman, you experience a racist incident. And maybe any given incident, you're like, I'm not sure if that guy interrupted me because he's just not good at not interrupting people, or in this specific moment, was it because he thought as a Black person that I wasn't worth listening to? But so it can be very hard to point to specific incidents and say, I know for sure that this incident was A or B. But what you can say, if you spent your entire life, as someone who is minoritized in some way, you know what the patterns look like. And I think that that's really, it's not that different from doing weak lensing, which is you develop an expertise for how to look for it, and then you're pretty good at finding it, and most of the time you know what you're doing.
Right. Oh, wow. Basically what you're describing, what you just described is the process of consciousness raising in the women's movement, because if you don't compare notes with another woman, you think that you're quite crazy. I mean, you're a bitch, you're a harpy, you're this or that. You're discontent. You're not a real woman. You're not, and certainly the same is true of race or of class. So when it's only when you get together with others who are experiencing something similar or the same that there is the you too effect, and that's when people begin to organize and mobilize. So the process that you explained is familiar, but I've never heard it parsed in terms of physics. This is so exciting. You also found that melanin, for example, was an unusual conductor of electricity. Boy, what I as a writer wouldn't do with that politically. So I want to thank you and have you back if I can catch you in your travels on the program to talk more, because we're almost out of time. What are you working on now?
I am actually wrapping up a paper where we think about a way to address the mass of the Higgs particle and how you can get it naturally, because the theory that we currently have doesn't tell us what the mass is. So I am actually, fitting some science in there as well.
Well, you're just terrific. Thank you again, and I hope you'll return.
Yes, thank you for having me.
It's time for one last break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I will return in just a moment with those fighting words.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back again with some fighting words. I'm going out on a limb here, but then that's where I'm usually most comfortable. A few weeks ago, I told you that I thought we were at the end of the beginning in terms of the Trump regime. Well, with former FBI Director James Comey's riveting testimony to the Senate committee Thursday, I think we've accelerated right into the beginning of the end. I want to focus on one aspect of his statement, a clue to Trump's staggeringly self-destructive behavior. Not the only motivation, but the most forgotten, yet possibly most crucial. It's the, quote, salacious and unverified material, close quote, about which Comey had to inform Trump during the transition. He did so alone to minimize potential embarrassment, and because, quote, if there was some effort to compromise an incoming president, we could blunt any such effort with a defensive briefing, period, close quote. You'll recall that we, the public, learned that this material, originally commissioned as political opposition research by Trump's GOP primary rivals, had been compiled by Christopher Steele, a retired senior operative with M16, the British intelligence service. Steele now runs his own private intelligence firm, but remains highly respected in both British and U.S. intelligence circles. The details can all be found online because the story was covered responsibly by The Independent, The Guardian, and other British newspapers, and it made its way into U.S. media, expurgated, to be finally published in full last January by BuzzFeed News. Steele's dossier reports Putin's FSB intelligence service planned, quote, to compromise Trump and develop him as a tool via sweeteners of real estate deals or funds, or through exploiting his personal obsession and perverted conduct in Moscow, which included hiring a number of prostitutes to perform a urination spectacle for him in a Ritz-Carlton hotel room that was under FSB control with microphones and concealed cameras. The local service industry source in St. Petersburg reported that Trump acted similarly in that city, but all direct witnesses recently have been silenced, bribed, or caused to disappear. Close quote. Hence, unverified. This golden showers story became the subject of comedians' jokes and online trending, and then it disappeared. Christopher Steele vanished, then reappeared. There was brief talk of his testifying before the Senate committee or being deposed in London. Then that died down. Why? Especially since the rest of the dossier has proved accurate. Is this information permanently unverifiable? Comey's scrupulous testimony reveals how Trump obsessively returned to this subject in meetings with him. Trump's two refrains being that he had never been involved with, quote, hookers in Russia, close quote, and that he was concerned about Mike Flynn. Can it be that Flynn is the connecting link to the verification? Was Flynn originally a loyal soldier, falling on his sword, keeping quiet, but then trying to get immunity by claiming he had, quote, quite a story to tell? In this labyrinth, everybody's chasing the money, a la Watergate, and that's fine, but Trump has no shame about enriching himself, family, and cronies by the presidency. He doesn't think his financial crimes are wrong. He smirked that not paying taxes made him smart, and his base agreed. But this information, still in the clutches of the FSB and perhaps Flynn's memory, this is different, and Trump knows his base will think so too. Oh, not the buying of prostituted women, mind you, but his having been sexually satisfied by women urinating on or in front of him. Trump's rebuttal to the story has been twofold. First, since he's a self-confessed germaphobe, it couldn't possibly be true. Except that germaphobes are, in fact, obsessed with their concept of being dirtied. Second, he's claimed, I always say hotel rooms are bugged, so I'm always very, very, very careful. Friends, when have we ever seen this man being careful? We have seen his pattern of inverting reality by claiming he's always done what he's never done, and of accusing others of what he does himself. In his world, there's no win-win, only win-lose. In his world, sadism and masochism are one, where megalomania masks self-contempt. His greatest fear is being laughed at, as he was by Obama at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. His standard speech refrain is, "Other countries are laughing at us." Fred Trump, his father, an authoritarian consumed with success in the basest terms, established a shame and humiliation culture in their home. The oldest son, Fred Jr., killed himself through alcoholism. In a stunning statement to the New York Times, Donald said about that brother, quote, "Everybody loved him. He's like the opposite of me," close quote. So Fred Sr. might grasp and possess, and Fred Jr. could drink and die, but what was left for Don except to fail, and fail again, while redefining that as success? For Donald, perhaps failing is the ultimate defiance against his father. For him, perhaps, failure is synonymous with freedom. It's only a few steps from there to that Moscow hotel room. Then to find he's in the White House by freakish circumstances, never having expected to win. What terror must haunt him? What wouldn't he do? What won't he betray to Putin or anyone to keep his secret safe from the world's laughter at his shame? And the story has been effectively buried. It may be the one scenario every man, Republican or Democrat, in the intelligence community or in Congress, would shrink from having to raise about another man. It could also be because some men would think, so what's the big deal? But it's the one scenario no woman would want to raise, either from a sense of disgust or because to suggest this fear is the core of what drives Trump to convulse our republic is to risk seeming like a crazy feminist. Yet it feels as if this key fits, as if this is the reason Russia can and will hold our national security hostage until Trump falls from power. If he can be brought down by charges of obstructing justice or financial crimes, that'll do. But I, for one, would like to hear more from Christopher Steele and his sources. Special Counsel Mueller, follow the money, sure, but cherchez les femmes. Those are my fighting words. Add yours on Twitter, and be sure to tag us at WMC Live and use the hashtag #FightingWords. And that's it for today. This program is syndicated, but if you can't find the broadcast on a radio station in your area, you can always visit us at WMCLive.com for the show, plus the archive of all our previous episodes, and at iTunes Worldwide, where you can stream, download, and subscribe to our show's podcast. Also, be sure to find WMC Live on Facebook and Twitter. And you can check out my own website and blog at robinmorgan.net and find me on Facebook and Twitter, too. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Opinions expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. WMC President and Executive Producer of this program, Julie Burton, and our founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us, and don't forget to join us next week right here on Women's Media Center Live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on WMCLive.com. Talk radio with a brain.